Hello friends, welcome to Game of Text channel. In this video, we're going to discuss a few interview questions on OOP concepts. That means object-oriented programming concepts and interview questions being asked in this topic. And we will be using Java language to discuss this one. Hope you will enjoy this video. Without further ado, let's jump into the topics. Thank you. So let's talk about what is OOP. Object-oriented programming or OOP is kind of a type of programming paradigm where programs are treated as real-world objects like cars or house, and these real-world objects will have properties that we call as variables, and there will be behaviors or functions that will deals with these properties actually. So that kind of programming concept is known as OOP or object-oriented programming. So let's create a simple, a class called car. It has properties like private string wheels, and this property can be set by using a setter method. Public we are receiving a string here, and we are setting that class dot wheels or this dot wheels the input. A very simple concept. Okay, so this property wheels has been set using this behavior called set wheels. Similarly, we can get the value using getter method. Get wheels. So it's very basic. So let's jump into the next question. And let's discuss about some of the principles of OOP. So when we talk about the principles, we can see that these are the most widely used principles or concepts in OOP. That is inheritance and abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, aggregation, proposition, and association. So let's go through a brief about all these concepts. What is inheritance? Inheritance is like suppose a car have some property like if inheritance is like getting the features of its parents. So suppose car is belongs to vehicle, right? So all vehicle is movable, otherwise it cannot be called as a vehicle, right? So let's see if there is an interface like or if a class like vehicle, I'm creating a class like vehicle, and it has a method called moving. Okay, public void moving method. I am just printing vehicle moving. Now when I extend this car with this vehicle, then this car object has got that property of behavior of moving. So it has fetched that this vehicle property. That is called inheritance. It has inherited the behavior of its parent. Now if I click on even I can call moving object, it will also work. So here I am creating a new car object, and I am calling this set wheels MRF, and the given input as MRF. Then what happens in the set wheels object? You can see the wheels has been set with this name, and I am just calling moving. You cannot see the moving behavior or function here in the car, but this moving is being called from this vehicle. So when I run this one, what happens? You can see the vehicle is moving is printed in the console. So that is called the inheritance. Now abstraction. Abstraction is like some certain cases we cannot define the actual behavior while developing it or while defining it. It has to be defined by its child classes or subclasses. For example, I am declaring this vehicle as abstract, and printing this vehicle is moving does not make much sense, because it makes sense when a car is moving or a bike is moving or bicycle is moving. So I'm just keeping this is abstract. I cannot define this method here, so I'm keeping this method as abstract, and I'm removing this implementation from here. And when I extend it, it will ask me to implement this method. So let's implement it moving, and here it asks for the implementation, right? So I'm going to the car is moving. When I run this one again, this program, it will display car is moving. Let's see, you can see. So this is called abstraction. Now encapsulation. Encapsulation is like wrapping the whole code into a particular unit, modularizing it, keeping it everything in a very handy. That is called encapsulation. When you look at this class vehicle, and it is everything belongs to this car is encapsulated in a class called car, right? This wheels and this behavior, everything belongs to this car. So that is one kind of encapsulation. And there will be so what we just saw is a class encapsulation. For example, the class is the properties and behaviors are encapsulated in a particular class. So encapsulation have several advantages. For example, this encapsulation helps to hide that data or implementation details, and encapsulation helps to increase the flexibility, increase the readability, increase the developing the application, increase the verbosity, everything, and reusability, everything is increased due to this encapsulation. And there are mainly three types of encapsulation being in Java. One is member variable encapsulation, function encapsulation, and class encapsulation. This is very important. Most of the interviews, they will be asked to explain about encapsulation. So these things are very important. If you say this clearly, that will make a good impression on interview. So let's discuss about briefly discuss about this member variable encapsulation. It is very simple. Like when we deal with it, here itself we can see the wheels has been set as private. So these wheels cannot be accessed anywhere outside this class car, but it can be accessed through this behavior called set wheels. So this is one example of member variable encapsulation. So we have exact control on what is being set. Here you can put a lot of validation if you want. If wheels dot equals something like a blank, then you can throw some exception. This kind of validation can be done. That will make sure that the wheels here has been set with the right value. Okay. So coming to the function encapsulation, let's see, when I set this set wheels method, it is public. Similarly, but if I want, I can create private methods. For example, private validate, private void, validate, fields. So this is something internal to that class, car class. So once the wheels has been set, we can call validate. Let's pass fields. Now we can do all kind of validation. You may not have to, expose this validate wheels in outside car class, but because this is belongs to only the car, right? So this is called in a function encapsulation. Like you are restricting the access to outside particular domain or particular field, and you are using the private and public modifiers. There are a lot of other modifiers like private, public, and default and protected. So according to the situation, we will use the correct modifiers. And class encapsulation we already discussed. Like this class will have private variables or public methods and public even variables members. So encapsulating providing security or restricting the invalid access to the class is called class encapsulation. Now let's go to the next topic called polymorphism. So talking about polymorphism is the capability of a method to do different things based on the the object that it is acting upon. So that means an object can take different forms based on either by compile time polymorphism or by runtime. So there are two different types of polymorphism. One is compile time and the other one is runtime polymorphism. Talking about compile time polymorphism, method overloading is an example for compile time, or we also call it as static polymorphism. And method overriding is example for runtime polymorphism. And I'll just give you a brief example of both these polymorphisms, and we will see how it works. The given code shows an example of compile time polymorphism, and it is example for method overloading as well. So how it works? You can see the two methods add. Both the signature is same and the return type is also same, but only the input parameter type is different actually. So when we call this method, based on the input parameter, compiler will decide what method needs to be called according to the here it is 3 parameters are there, here it is 2 parameters are there. Even you can add one more method which actually which works for the double values. Okay, now you can see the same method name is same, but the type is different. So the compile when you write a program which will call this add method and you have given the input as 2 double values, then this statement will be executed, and this will be identified or derived during the compilation time itself, not on the runtime. So that's the reason it is called compile time polymorphism, and this is called method overloading. Coming back to runtime polymorphism or dynamic polymorphism, which we called as, let me delete this one. Let's come back to vehicle and car class. Look at this code where I have the vehicle class and I have a method called moving. It will print vehicle is moving. And the car class is extending the vehicle class. It is also having a method called moving, and which is overriding the vehicle method, and it will print car is moving. Now come back to main program, where I have declared vehicle class here, and a new object of vehicle is being assigned to the vehicle, and here the type is vehicle, but I am assigning the car object to the vehicle. Now when we run vehicle.moving, it is printed vehicle is moving. And when I call this moving method from the car object, actually it is the type is vehicle, but I am calling this moving method from this type. It has printed car moving. That means in the runtime the car object is okay. Let me change this to vehicle itself for better understanding. Vehicle 2. So now when I call it vehicle 2.moving, it is printed the car because it is mapped to the car object. So during the runtime, it has derived which method has to be called according to that object reference, isn't it? This is called method overriding or runtime polymorphism. Now the third fifth property of object-oriented programming, aggregation. So talking about association and aggregation and composition, this is one of the very widely asked question actually. What is the difference between this or what is the significance of association, aggregation, and composition? And when talking about association actually something like a class is has a relationship is called association. For example, student and address, and students has an address, right? So there is suppose if there is any student class, and instead of student and address, let's keep this example itself. Suppose a car is having a wheel, isn't it? So here car has a wheel. That relationship is there. Car and the wheel. Okay. Now what is aggregation? Aggregation is actually one type of association. That means aggregation is also has a relationship. So if you look carefully at this example, what you can see is we have wheel association and a music system. Now music system association is something like this car is having a music system. That is correct. So it is called as aggregation. It is still be an association, but something weak association. We call it as weak association because a car exists even even if you remove the music system from its class, because it does not impact the car, right? There are cars with music system or without. So a weak association is called as aggregation. And look at this wheel. This is called composition, because to run the car, wheel is very much required. It's a required entity, must have entity. So this will be known as actually composition. Something which is having a strong relationship with the class is known as composition. But as I mentioned earlier, both are actually associations. So having said that, I think it is clear about all these terms: association, aggregation, and composition. Let's move to the next question. Now let's talk about what is this object-oriented and object-based programming languages. This is very simple actually. Object-oriented means it will support most of the or almost all the principles and values of object-oriented programming languages. For example, inheritance, polymorphism, everything. C++, Java, and other Microsoft-based programming languages like C# or VB are object-based programming languages. Everything in Python, everything nowadays high-level programming languages are object-oriented programming languages. Whereas, there are programming languages like JavaScript, which does not support inheritance and polymorphism. So those are, examples for, object-based programming languages. Having said that, we'll move to the next question. What is a class? So sometimes interviewer will ask, what is a class? It's a very simple question, but sometimes we struggle to answer it. So when talking about a class is actually a prototype or a template for creating an object that is called class, right? And a class can have properties or members and behaviors or methods, and these members or properties will hold the certain state of that object, and through the behaviors we can change the state of that object. So basically a class is like a building template, or it's a blueprint to create how the object should be, how the object should work. That is called a class. Next question can be, what is an object? Object is actually, from the blueprint or from the class, once you instantiate an class, or it is an instance of a class called object. And object also contains, it's a instance, it's an instance of the class, so it definitely contains what are the class variables and the behaviors associated with this object as well. Talking about the next question, there is one famous question like, what is the diamond problem in Java? It is also known as deadly diamond of death. And this problem is basically associated with multiple inheritance. In Java, actually multiple inheritance is not allowed. So in order to explain the diamond problem, let me just write some sample program. So look at this program. There is a class called human, and the father class extends human, and it has a method called smile. So the father smiles like kind of a masculine smile, and similarly mother also extends human class, then mother also having a smile, and mother smiles like a feminine smile. Okay, now the problem is, if the child class extends father and mother, suppose Java supports extends multiple inheritance by using extends keyword, then what we do not need to that means the child is having the behaviors of father and mother. No, the problem comes, we don't even need to implement the smile method in child, because it is already having that behavior inherited from father and mother. Now what will happen if I create a child object and call the smile? Here the Java will have a confusion, which one has to be called, whether it is a mother smile method or father smile method. So this kind of problem, because of this confusion, Java does not allow multiple inheritance using extends keyword. So what is the remedy? What is the solution for this kind of issue? This is the actual issue of diamond problem, because there is a confusion which behavior has to be called, right? So Java handles this problem by means of implement interfaces actually. So Java supports multiple inheritance by using interfaces. Why how interfaces helps here is another question actually. So when we use an interfaces does not have already implemented method. It is only having abstract methods, right? So when we implement a method, you will be forced to implement that unimplemented method in your child class. So suppose if I am implementing a father and mother interface, then you will be forced to implement the child's behavior here for that smile behavior, right? So that's the reason Java supports multiple inheritance using interfaces. Let me just code that as well, okay, for better understanding. Now look at this, interfaces. We have human interface. Interface father is extending human interface. Interface mother is also extending human interface. Here we are not implementing that smile method. Mother also not implemented it. So this is being implemented in the child class. So if here implements, here multiple inheritance is possible because we have not given the implementation in the mother or father. So when we give the implement, we are forced to implement this smile method in the child class. Otherwise it will show error. So, in this case, when I create a child object and call the smiles method, there is no confusion for the runtime environment, like, which method needs to be called. It can directly call this method and this can be printed. Maybe I should change this to child. Okay. So that is, having said that, we just discussed about the diamond problem. Let's go to the next question. Let's talk about the solid principles of object-oriented design. So what is the solid? This is very very important questions. There has been most of the interviews they will be asking, what is, do you know solid principles? Actually, this is a topic where it itself has to be it's a very big topic. Actually, I'll be doing a separate video just covering all these solid principles, but as some of you might know what is solid, but some of you not aware of it. It is a bit complicated as well, but having knowledge on solid is really help to crack that interview. Anyway, I will just give a brief intro of solid principles just to brush up your knowledge. And this solid principle is this first letter represents the name of that principle actually. So it contains 5 principles actually. So one of the first principle is the single responsibility principle. What is single responsibility? For example, if you are defining a class, that class should have one single responsibility. That means it, when you're doing the programming, when you develop it, suppose a calculate, if you have a class called calculator, for calculator class, what it does, it will calculate some addition or subtraction. Okay, now you will be having different methods, add, subtract, divide, multiply, everything is fine. Now think about that class is having a method called play games or draw human, something like that. It is really ridiculous, right? Having a class with a calculator, and if there is a method which is nowhere related to that context. So that's the reason it's saying the class should have related content, and single responsibility means there should be only one reason to change the class. One reason to change the class in the sense, for example, what should I say? Suppose you have a calculator class and you want to support not only integer number, you need to support complex number. So that is a reason, that is a valid reason to change that class. That's fine. But there should be there shouldn't be any unrelated reason to change that class. If you are adding all these non-related behavior to one class, that will become very bad design. So that is the primary goal of being aligned with a single responsibility principle. This basically says there should be only one reason to change that class. Okay, Now talking about open clause principle. What is open clause means? A class should be open for extension but closed for modification. A perfect example would be, suppose you have a calculator class actually. So the business asked you to develop a calculator for for calculating the addition operation for their business, and you developed it. And the problem here is, once you developed, you can see this is a calculation operation. Now you are having addition operation, and you are setting left and right operands into that class, and you can get the left operands and right operand. Now you can see here, like in the calculator, what you do is you are receiving that type of operation, and you are checking in that calculator what kind of operation it has come using instance of operator. Then you create that addition, and you are taking the left and right, and you are calculating the sum, and you are printing it. Now looking at this problem, it works perfectly, no problem. But the problem is here, tomorrow if the business asks you to add one more functionality called subtraction, then what you have to do, you have to change this calculator class, isn't it? So this kind of uh, uh, design is not good, as the calculator class has to be modified very frequently. It depends upon the functionality or requirement from the business. So according to open clause principle, it says it should be open for extension but closed for principle. As per this principle, it must be able to if there is a new feature has been added, it should be able to incorporate that feature without much modification in the main class. That is the that is what this open clause principle states. And it's a bit difficult to solved principles is difficult to explain briefly. Actually, we have to do that coding, and we have to explain, then only you will be able to understand it. Anyway, let's move I will be doing a separate video for all these solved principles. Having said that, let's move to Liskov substitution principle. Liskov substitution principle actually an extension of open closed principle actually. So what happens in open close principle, as I mentioned earlier, open close principle, if we add new feature, it should be able to work. Similarly here also, if I add one new feature like subtraction operation, it should behave properly. I mean, it should have it should work in a way that means you should be able to enable you to replace how can I explain that? You should be able to replace that parent class object with the objects of subclass without breaking the application. That means if you are adding a subtraction operation, it should be able to work as expected without the changing the calculation class actually. So this requires all subclasses to behave in the same way as the parent class. To achieve that, your subclasses needs to follow few rules actually. Apply at the least the same rule to all output parameters as applied by the parent class, and do not implement any stricter validation rules on input parameters than implemented by the parent class. These are the some rules you need to keep in mind when you are thinking of having Liskov substitution principle. Your program design is aligned with this Liskov substitution principle. Having said that, let's move to the next topic. Let's look at an interface called Athlete, and talking about interface segregation principle. when there is a class Usain Bolt who implements the athlete, we can see that there are two abstract methods: swim and run. So it does not make any sense, implementing a swim function in Usain Bolt's class, because he is not a swimmer. He is a runner, right? So we can, implement his run behavior actually, but this does not make any sense. In this kind of scenario, what can be done? Then we need to, in this kind of scenario, the basic idea is like, you should not have an you should not, in your code, there shouldn't be any reason like, you keep something like, which does not have implementation, or if you are not able to provide an implementation, then there is a serious problem with your design. In this kind of scenario, we may have to segregate the interface to sub interface. For example, let's segregate it to, delete these two behavior from the athlete, and we create two new other interface, like running in athletes and swimming athletes, and we provide abstract method run and swim accordingly. Now if we implement Usain Bolt to running athlete, then we need to override only the run method, isn't it? Sorry, we just have to implement run method. So that is what interface segregation principle says. Basically, you should not have your class need not have to implement something which is not relevant. And the next topic will be dependency inversion principle. Dependency inversion principle states that the high level module should not depend on the low level modules. Both should depend on abstraction, and the abstraction should not depend on detail. Detail should depend on the abstraction. So it's very easy actually. For example, let's consider an example. Very simple example will be like when you develop something using Model View Control MVC framework, or even if you're developing a Spring Boot project from the Rust, if you're having a Rust controller or something, then from the service layer you will be injecting the dependency from the service layer dependency, and you will be declare the interface for that. That means tomorrow if there is no service needs to be injected, that can be done, isn't it? So that is the basic idea behind it. Like you, if the low level modules or low level layer, you should not have concrete implementation. Instead that you low level module, we can create a interface for that in low level modules, then use that interface in your high level. And whenever there is a change comes, or if you want to change that service layer to some other service layer, then it will be easy for you, right? You have to inject that whatever service layer implementation you are injecting, that will start working it. That is the basic idea behind dependency inversion. That means the dependency should be injected according to the scenario or context. The high level module should not depend on the low level. Whatever changes happens in the low level modules, that should not have a bad effect on this high level modules. So that's the brief idea about a salt principle. But some of you may not have understood the whole concept. I will be doing a separate video for all this, with an example, all this salt principle with an example and coding. That will help you to understand it. So stay tuned for that video. Okay, having said that, let's go to the next interview question. Now, sometimes you will be asked what is static binding and dynamic binding in Java. So static binding is like during the compile time, if binding happens during the compile time, that is static binding. For example, method overloading. So the compiler does know during the compilation itself what method is to be called according to your program. But that is not the case with the dynamic binding. For example, method overriding a perfect example for dynamic binding, because it is at the runtime the Java runtime environment will get to know what is that object needs to be binded to the reference variable. In static binding, actually private or static or final methods, these methods are primarily a static binding candidates actually, because they cannot be overridden. Other methods, I mean, other than private, static and final, those can be candidates for dynamic binding. Static binding is also called early binding, and the dynamic binding is also called late binding. That's all we have to talk about static binding. And as we already mentioned about the encapsulation, right? You can completely encapsulate a member to member. Let it be a variable or method in Java. So how can you encapsulate a variable? That you can encapsulate by using private keyword. So encapsulation is actually enforces the protection on variables or function from outside of the class in order to better manage that piece of code, or having least impact or no impact on other part of a program due to changing the protected code. So that is called encapsulation. And in some interviews you will be asked what is data hiding and a data abstraction, and what is the difference. So data hiding is limiting the access to details of one implementation. So how do you make data hiding work? So that's the reason I am mentioning encapsulation is one of the way to do data hiding. So by restricting access to internal implementation details, for example using private keyword, that will help you to achieve the data hiding. Then what is abstraction? Abstraction is like um, for example a car. So when as a user I do not need to worry about its engine, how the engine works, or how AC works. So I just worried about how to drive that car, right? The internal implementation is abstracted to the user. That is called abstraction. How can we achieve that abstraction? That is called through abstract class or interfaces will help us to achieve the abstraction in Java. Interface will provide 100% abstraction, but abstract classes will provide 0 to 100%. Depends upon number of abstract methods in that abstract class. That's all about hiding, data hiding, and data abstraction. Cohesion and coupling is two important keywords in object-oriented design actually. So what is high cohesion, and why do we need to have high cohesion? Suppose you are developing few classes, you are developing a program. Now suppose your classes are focused on actions it can perform, and it's limited. That is called high cohesion. For example, you have a calculator class, and the calculator class only focused on calculating, adding or subtracting similar behavior. It does not focus on any other behavior like drawing a rectangle or drawing a graph. So if it is focused on what it is intended for, then that program is called, if every member, every classes, everything is focused on what it has to do. It does not focus on every class is not focused on which is something which it does not need to do. Then you have a highly cohesion in your application. Every program must have high cohesion and low coupling. What is meant by low coupling? That means how related or dependent two classes or modules are towards each other. That means if you change one class, it should not affect the other one. If your application classes are something like this way, you designed in this way, then you can say that very well say here that you have very low coupling. If one module is highly dependent on other module, then the coupling is high, right? If one module is, or one one class is does not have much dependency on some other classes, then there is a low coupling is there. So when you design a system, it must keep in mind that your design must have high cohesion and low coupling. This is very important for interview. Having said that, I think I almost covered most of that concepts and other mostly widely asked questions in OOPs. Stay tuned. Thank you for your time, and please subscribe, and if you like this video, like it, and also provide your comments in the comment box, and please click on this notification button for further future videos. Thank you all. Have a nice day.